I'm so thrilled to have my friend Ulf with me today because he has been a transformation agent, not only in his industry, but as a technology leader, bringing a whole new framework and thinking to the way people and technology interact and making it more accessible. And so I'm just delighted to learn from and be mentored by and partnering with a man who really cares very much about how it is that we can bring people as leaders along to continue to be transformation agents. So Ulf, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Mark, and thanks for the very kind introduction.
Well, I'm inspired by you, my friend. And I think the interesting thing for me and for you is this not being our first rodeo, it's probably apparent that we both have been a part of technology organizations and revolutions or evolutions. So there's many iterations, many generations now involved in technology. And I think one of the surprise ironies of technology is that some of it gets quite old and we're having to continuously refresh. So you'd think we'd all be programmed to continue to transform, to continue to drive and reach for the next star. Could you talk a little bit about the experience of what it's been for you? Because you've done this many times, how it is that you inspire people to think about continuous improvement and change. How do you light people up to want to do that when they already have a big dance card or what's going on?
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful intro. And I honestly speaking, you never know what's in store for you in your career. Like when I started this, I had no idea. But it needs foundationally a passion for technology. And the fun thing with leading technology organizations is that every day is a new day because this is evolving so fast. And it's also part of a global ecosystem of continuous research, continuous findings in a corporate world as much as it is in a university world, in an educational world, and all that coming together, creating new frontiers for technology, just moving at light speed. The good thing with technology organizations is that they are learning organizations, and how quickly they learn and how fast they adapt to a continuously changing world is going to determine their success rate. And I think just being fortunate, as I've been in my career, to lead some of the most advanced technology work that's been done in telecom. Telecom being a very high-tech sector, as everybody knows. Now we're in the 5th generation of mobile systems. And just being part of that and lead teams to big success in that, and understanding that continuous learning and adaptation is the key parameters that will decide the outcome. It's just been tremendous.
When you think about that, I imagine that, you've done a lot of what I've been able to witness just a little bit of, seeing you bring together multiple organizations within an organization to choose to see each other, to collaborate, to think about what the synergies are, that as you get to scale or as you get larger, we all do create usually divisions of a company, so you have expertise, which is a good thing, but then also the challenges that could be a siloing. And it's been lovely to see how you brought people together from many disciplines. Could you talk about the role that has in the work that you're talking around transformation?
Right. Well, first, one of the first insights I made in my career was that I thought management was about managing my team and, figuring out what, how to compensate them or how to develop them individually. And I spent probably my first years doing that until I understood that the success was so much more dependent on all the teams around us, everybody else who needs to contribute. And that means that seeing the larger team, understanding the context where you're at, and understanding that your team will never be able to develop all the technology needed to make big, real achievements, independent of size. And that comes, when I was leading the radio work at Ericsson at some point in my time in career, there were thousands of good people. There were thousands of good people there. But the innovation that they needed to adapt to and change to and build into what we did, whether it was new types of chips that came out or new advancements in software. Even at that time, we were working with what at that time called machine learning, which is today going under the big slogan of AI. All of that stuff was stuff that we could never have figured out if we were an isolated team. So teams to lead these technology teams are always going to be presenting a North Star and a vision, but then making sure that they get everything they need from every other team on the planet working on a similar challenge. And you could think about that. Sounds really sloganish. I am aware of that, but it is actually true. Like you have to scout innovation and figure out other groups and people working on similar problems. For example, in mobile communication, one of the key challenges to move that forward is to be able to use advanced mathematics. So all our modulation of signals and all that is based on advanced mathematics. So then you have to figure out, okay, so where is the biggest advancements in mathematics? And you have to find people who are doing research in those areas and see that we can incorporate this in what we're doing. And I think traditional product development, if you go back and read the school book on it, it doesn't really talk so much about that. It talks much more about how the process is being done, and you have toll gates and all kinds of stuff. But real innovation in high-tech companies is never done like that, my opinion. Is much more done as an iterative process and finding out others that are trying to crack the similar problems and moving faster than everybody else in implementing it in some sort of fashion, in a platform or in something that later becomes a product of some sort. And I think for T-Mobile, where I'm working now, that's exactly what we're doing here too. Like we are not the innovation hub that's going to make all this happen, but we're going to be at the center of where it happens and move it forward faster than anyone else. And that's what we've done with our network here. And that's what I think is the key differentiator. So how do you then lead that? You lead that by fostering continuous learning, fostering, stealing innovation or understanding where it's happening, and collaborating with others who are doing things that are advancing things forward. And that normally is a massive inspiration to all kinds of technology organizations, that approach, and being iterative and knowing that you will never get it right the first 200 times. But you may get it right over time, and it will be better and better. And as you do that, and testing it with the reality, the real world, testing it with customers and testing it with things, that's what really brings technology organizations forward fast.
When they're partnering with the customer, so you embed yourselves in the process of partnering towards the iterative exercise. When you think about the forces working towards and against, you mentioned a couple of those that really work towards the enlightened self-interest of wanting to change faster than your competitors in favor of the customer. What would be some of the internal forces that resist that kind of embracing of cross-pollination and iterative change?
Yeah, that's very interesting, right? So what prevents this from happening even faster?
Yes, right.
I would say that the largest single force is collaboration and making people collaborate. For some reason, we all, like when we sit around the table as a management team and we talk about collaboration, everybody collaborates like crazy. But we all know that this is at the end of the day about careers or about compensation or about achievements or recognition or whatever it is, which is not always fostering collaboration. So one has to think about all those systems, all those, incentive systems that drives people and motivates people to make them align for collaboration. That will be one of the most important things. Another thing is perfection. So engineers by nature have a certain degree of perfection. And that, I don't know where that comes from. It's probably the sorting algorithm of who goes to engineering school from the beginning, but in some sort of way, right? We're all fostered as mathematicians or physics, and all of that is relying on a high degree of perfection. But with high-tech development being so fast as it is, there is no way you're gonna thrive all from perfection. You have to live on assumptions or fairly good assumptions. And to drive that in an organization without making people worried or feeling insecure or unsafe is another aspect of what can be a prohibitor, I think, internally to move as fast as you want. And then you need, of course, a good structure, and you need other things. If you don't have that, you will lose yourself. So you need a very good decision structure and other things that make people find safety rather in the processes than finding it in perfection.
That's a brilliant way to talk about this issue of psychological safety, because it ends up being this noble effort that everybody's fundamentally or philosophically in favor of innovation, as long as you go first. It's not me. I like when change happens in the other department than when it happens to me. I have lots of things on my plate right now. I think you have a lot more to work on than I do. And so this notion of making it safe to realize we have to move fast.
But it's funny when you say that, Mark, because I think the safety has to come from the ability in a room to fail, or have projects that don't come in on time, or anything that would be, and to celebrate the achievement, whatever it was, is more important than looking that did we reach all the way up to the target. I was in a meeting the other day that someone said, oh, how come our organization is not bold enough to set the boldest targets? Yeah, well, then we don't have that safety, right? So you have to create an environment where people are bold enough to set bolder targets than could possibly be even achieved sometimes. And I think target setting is a big art form, but I always look for the opportunity of saying, okay, I know this is half impossible, but what would be a target that if we had infinite number of resources and we had infinite technology, what could we then do? Oh, you mean like that? Okay, then so that's, I think, is you gotta have to lead the people to think away all the limitations, because I think we're wired ultimately to think about all the limitations and then figure out what would be a possible outcome. But as we all know, technology organizations do have very high capability of overcoming impossible problems too.
Yes, it's been proven that's how it works, and it's messy.
We call that innovation, by the way. I mean, that's right. Kind of what it is.
That petri dish that falls on the floor. When you think about this notion of the iterative process and the progress that's been made over time, it's this marrying between the discipline of then setting objectives. When I think about, you describe the fact that the boldness might be a factor that is frightening and also enabling in terms of its empowerment. I remember hearing John Doerr, the famous venture capitalist, talk about the origin of the OKRs coming out of the military, and then at Intel in the glory days. And the idea was that you were to set objectives that were always not completely achieved, actually, so that you'd have that stretch goal, that you're always pushing yourself. And I'm thinking that's the opposite of what we learned as engineers and finance people, or anybody who went to great schools, because we were trained to perfection. Back to your earlier point, we had to get perfect test scores, and that doesn't help.
Right. And I think in particular, a high-tech world is always pushed forward by having impossible goals. For some reason and then you don't always get to all that. And we all know how many crash and burns there are in terms of, I mean, if you look at AI now, I was in a meeting the other day where, is it going to be now the evolution of ChatGPT 4? Is that really going to take over all this? And are they going to be able to build applications that are much more advanced than the large language models that it's sort of solving today? And nobody knows. But the only way to learn is to do. So you have to lead an organization where you're willing to do, and you're willing to take shortcuts. Because shortcuts is what you in order to succeed, you need to take massive amounts of shortcuts. But then when you do that, you have to be calculating what those shortcuts are to get faster to the target. So if somebody's already written if someone has already written a piece of code, it's not so innovative to try to re-innovate that piece of code that somebody already wrote somewhere. And we live in a world where you could easily adopt and get things put in as you have a bigger objective or a bigger technology challenge to solve. And for us, this is super important that in the work we're doing now at T-Mobile, because we want to make sure that we have a 5G network that is better than anybody else's. And by just adopting and looking at what's out there and how we can evolve that, we will be able to do that. At the same time, we need to make sure we don't deploy things that are not so good. So we fail fast. We don't like, okay, that doesn't work. Let's not do that anymore. Let's do this. So, and having an organization that thinks like that, in a group think, like a larger thing, not only a few individuals, but really understand to not waste time and not waste money. One of the largest things of failure is also wasting time and money. Like
Yes.
technology is about making choices. And what you not choose to do is more important than what you choose to do sometimes, because
Yes.
you could easily go down, and we all know that there are so many technology companies that are failing because they bet on something that wasn't so good. And it's better to call that very fast. Like, we're not going down that track, that, we're going. So the iterative process of always continuously removing waste is super important to be able to make fast development.
Try a lot of things and see what works as quickly as possible and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Learn from those iterations, and then take the best and leave the rest. Does create a demand for urgency.
And have a fairly trained organization on guesstimating what works and what doesn't. Because I've been to many of our suppliers and other companies, and they all try since I'm their customer, when you come, they're trying to show how innovative they are. But even on the first trial, you sort of like, wow, they're just what do you say? They're just spreading innovative words around. It doesn't make them very innovative. They're probably like, what is their focus? What are they actually trying to achieve? And in what way would that help me? And to be much more sort of targeted towards the, and for us, we know exactly where we're going. We're going to have the best network in the world. So in that sense, try to put their innovation in some sort of context that would make sense. Many companies have, what do you call it? Innovation forums, innovation groups, and all that. And sometimes you wonder why you do all that, right? This is just, try to as little waste as possible is a good idea. So that would be my take or my advice on leading technology organizations.
Very helpful, very powerful observations, because it's hard won. You've had lots of iterations to experience what works.
And I wasted a lot of money in my career on,
Right. It's not.
And I always go back and say, could I have realized that technology was just a waste of time? Like, did we go too far too early with this new processor, gallium nitride transistor technology, or whatever it might be? Because technology is always about timing, and timing for large technology organizations is based on understanding exactly when to find what and put it together in going where you want to go. And that requires, I would say, experience, but at the same time, many of these organizations need continuous blood coming in all the time. So you got to combine sort of more experienced with also new talent that can help drive new innovation pools that you wouldn't even know about in the older talent pool.
Unless you bring that new DNA, and it's
disruptive, you have to,
in a hopefully good way, if you allow it.
Yeah, and managing all that kind of the trick. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Because you got what may feel like a prima donna may also be a hard one and very, very important strategic decision. So getting a lot of voices at the table, including them. I think when we talk about diversity, often people lose the thread of the fact that if we're all the same at the table, we're not actually contributing. And so getting those many voices heard and included so that you can have a large end.
That's a really good point, Mark. And I'm glad you made that, because many times it's shown in my career that the next big stride in solving a problem did not come from the loudest mouths. So there is someone who knows. It's a matter of finding that individual or group that is working on something that could actually bring us forward. And it may be internal or maybe external. So the inclusion is extremely important, and to have an inclusive culture and make your leaders include other leaders in what they do.
As you opened, that was, I think, very powerful to say that it comes from the collaboration of the group. So you have those many voices. It probably isn't just that one person's point of view, too. It's the combination or the amplification or the provocation that comes from that idea. Oh, that might not exactly work, but boy, we hadn't even thought about it that way. This will. So that notion of getting the whole team, involved around it, rather than sometimes what happens, we get a little attached to Mark's idea, or Mark gets too attached to Mark's idea, and I'm selling my idea rather than our mission. How do you help these people who have pretty high self-concept? They're very bright. You've tried to get the best and brightest people. How do you manage when you have people with very, very high opinions of themselves, or maybe be allowed in the room?
That's a good question. And I always try to see, like, hire people that are smarter than yourself is an old slogan, but it's actually really, if you can get that through every layer, you will have enormously smart people in the end, right? Just mathematically. But that would build a big brain trust. And that comes from, I think, not fostering a culture of being, the leader doesn't have to be the brightest person in the room. So it's which is a traditional problem. Like if you go to where the leader is the brightest person in the room, and then you go out, that fosters a culture of that all the way down, all through the layers, which is never a good idea. Yes, if you can foster a culture of the leader not being the brightest person in the room and trying to get people to speak out and foster that layer by layer, you will unleash an enormous amount of thoughts and diversity of thought, which will eventually, I think, lead to a much more innovative culture. And a lot of what we talk about now, Mark, may seem like, okay, that's good for them, like 5G and T-Mobile and high tech and all that. But I'm running a, I don't know, airline or a bank, or I'm doing this. And I would say that these things apply to every one of these, because we are moving so fast now. And I meet so many CEOs or CTOs or technology people in any company today. The digital adaption and the AI enablement of what they're doing is going to be deciding whether you succeed or not. So it may feel like, wow, that's for the innovation. I think this is very highly applicable across the board, whatever you're doing today. And not maybe to the degree that you need to do, look for the spearhead in latest transistor technology if we're running an airline. But the corresponding technologies, and without knowing it, I would just guess that it would have to do with social media. It would have to do with the web world or the app world, as well as the latest advancements on smartphones, because those are all of a sudden the whole experience of the air travel. It's just moved out of being the airplane. The airplane is important. I'm not saying that. It's probably in there somewhere. But that the whole thing has moved on to be a journey of other experiences, which has to do a lot with innovation and how you can deploy things in a very IT-centric world.
You make a very profound point for both the CEO and the chief technology people within any of these organizations across industries, because, and I've started to hear this more and more, every company is a technology company now, that whatever was done in the back office is now the front office, is apps and social media and retail, enterprise. Yeah.
And we meet even like when I meet friends and say, okay, so you're working for a mobile operator. Okay, so what do you do? Run towers and stuff? Yeah, a little bit. But what we're mainly doing is transforming the whole experience of connectivity. And what we can contribute with, for us, it's about what we can contribute with to the digitalization of so many other companies. Because at the end of the day, when you're looking, if you're running a warehouse, or you're running an airport, or if you're doing a mass transit system in some city or whatever, mobility is part of what you do. So the mobility technology that we supply to all this is going through a massive transformation in terms of what we can mean for other companies to achieve their goals and their ultimate transformations. So we are not sitting isolated here. We're really part of the much larger transformation of technology in a large ecosystem. And as a leader, then, it's important to embrace that.
I find that listening to you talk about how to partner with the customers in that way to help them iterate towards a brighter, faster, more impactful experience for all of their customers is the holy grail. So I'm so appreciative of having the opportunity to work with you and to be a partner of yours. And I've been also impressed at how you've been increasing the amount of leadership development. Having the opportunity to be your coach has been quite an honor for me. So I feel very
Well,
blessed.
likewise, I'm very happy to have the work with you, Mark, and you're an inspiration because you bring so much other input to what we're doing and what I'm doing in my organization. So thank you for that.
And thank you for being here for all the chief executives, C-suite level people, and those who aspire to those roles to be with us on the Chief Executive Summit. And we hope that we can continue a dialogue because as technology iterates, Ulf is always on the leading edge. So thanks for being here today, Ulf.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.